So far, we have talked a lot about the structure and organization of the epidermis and dermis, but there are a few structures that we have not considered, the glands and hairs that are also part of the skin. As you may remember from Chapter 4, glands are composed of epithelial tissue. In the skin, glandular tissue is derived from the epidermis, so sweat glands and sebaceous glands are called accessory structures or skin appendages. Hair follicles are also derived from the epidermis and fall into this category as well. In this video, I will describe a selection of accessory structures of the skin. Please note that I will not discuss hair and nails in great detail here, but information about those structures is in Chapter 5 of your textbook. We will wrap up lecture with a brief description of a few common skin pathologies. Your objectives for this video are to identify and describe the functions of the accessory structures of the skin, specifically the eccrine and apocrine sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and hairs. You should also be able to describe the importance of the erector pili muscle in helping sebaceous glands to secrete sebum. Your second objective is to describe or characterize different pathologies that commonly occur in the skin. In this video, we'll look specifically at acne, burns, and skin cancer. Let's get started. Skin appendages are structures that are associated with the skin but serve a particular function such as cooling, lubrication, sensation, or protection. The appendages are formed from epidermis-derived cells and chemical signals from the dermis when we're in the womb. The appendages of the skin include your sweat glands. There are two types, the eccrine and the apocrine, the sebaceous or oil glands, hairs and hair follicles, and nails. Your sweat glands are sometimes called sudoriferous glands. Sudoriferous, and I'd like for you to learn this term. There are two main types of sudoriferous glands. First, you have the eccrine sweat glands. These are abundant on the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, and on your forehead. These glands are simple, coiled, tubular glands with ducts that connect to funnel-shaped pores at the surface of the skin. The cells in the secretory region of these glands secrete sweat via merocrine secretion. So that means that sweat is formed in vesicles, and then those vesicles fuse with the apical portion of the cell and dump the sweat into the lumen of the gland. Sweat is a filtrate of the blood. It's 99% water plus a little bit of sodium chloride, vitamin C, antibodies, dermicidin, which is an antimicrobial peptide that's made by the body, and metabolic wastes. The main function of sweat is thermoregulation. As you may remember from earlier in this chapter, we discussed how sweat helps to cool the body when the core body temperature goes above 37 degrees Celsius, or what is normal. This image shows you what an eccrine sweat gland looks like in an anatomical model or in a histology slide. As you can see over here, the gland consists of one long coiled tube that is connected to a duct that opens up at the surface of the skin in an opening called a sweat pore. In a histological slide, an eccrine sweat gland basically looks like a series of tubules, like these, that are embedded in dense, irregular connective tissue. That's the primary tissue type of the dermis. The second type of sudoriferous gland, that is, sweat gland, is called the apocrine sweat gland. This gland is found in the skin, the breast, the eyelid, and the ear. Most apocrine glands in the skin are in the axillary, anogenital, and areolar area of the breast, that is, around the nipples. These glands secrete sebum, a fatty substance containing many proteins and possibly human pheromones. Secretion of sebum occurs through a unique apocrine mechanism, in which sebum is accumulated in the apical portion of the cells deep within the apocrine gland, and then that part of the cytoplasm pinches off, forming a sebum-containing vesicle. The ducts for these glands open up into hair follicles, which direct the sebum up towards the surface of the skin. Once the sebum arrives at the surface, bacteria begin to feast on it, producing odorous molecules, giving the sweat a strong smell. These glands are inactive in children, but become active in puberty and onwards through the influence of sex hormones. In the context of evolution, it's thought that these glands served as sexual scent glands, and that the odors produced attracted mates. The apocrine glands of the ear and breast are specialized glands. Cereminous glands are apocrine glands that are located in the external ear. Here. There, they secrete cerumen or earwax into hair follicles, which direct the cerumen up to the surface of the canal. This waxy substance traps dirt and dust at the opening of the ear. It also discourages insects from entering the canal, and it provides lubrication. Apocrine glands in the mammary glands of the breast produce a modified sweat product called milk. The sebaceous glands are widely distributed throughout the skin, except on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. Most of these glands develop from hair follicles and become active at puberty under the influence of sex hormones like testosterone. These glands secrete sebum. Again, sebum is an oily, waxy mixture of lipids, and it's made by holocrine secretion, so that means the cells that are making sebum rupture, causing leaving behind debris and cell fragments in the gland. Sebum is bactericidal, and it softens hair and skin. It also inhibits water loss. But how does the oil, the sebum, get out of sebaceous glands? It's a really cool story. So what you're looking at here on the left is a histology section of a hair follicle. Here's the follicle, right here. You can probably see the hair growing out here. This is a sebaceous gland. Sebaceous glands are attached to hair follicles, and their ducts actually open up into the follicle. Okay, so there's the sebaceous gland here. Just outside of the sebaceous gland is this. This is a small muscle called the erector pili muscle. You can see it going in this direction. When this muscle contracts, it pulls on the hair follicle, causing your hairs to stand up like you see over here, but it also compresses the sebaceous gland, squeezing it or milking sebum out of it and pushing that sebum into the hair follicle. Then the sebum follows the hair and follicle up to the surface of the skin where it helps to lubricate. Because the erector pili are muscles and not derivatives of the epidermis, they are not considered accessory structures of the skin like the sebaceous glands and the eccrine sweat glands are. Now, contraction of erector pili muscles is a vestigial trait. It's thought to be left over from our mammalian ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago. So these muscles are contracted under several circumstances. For example, when a mammal is cold and it raises its fur for insulation that traps a layer of warm air next to the skin. Maybe you've seen a cat or a dog do this, or a horse do this, or maybe even a squirrel in the wintertime. These muscles can also be contracted in defense Sometimes, kind of like what this cat is doing, animals will bush out their fur in order to look bigger and exaggerate their size. During offense or attack, when these animals are trying to achieve dominance or get food or intimidate another animal of the same species, they may also bush out their fur to look bigger or to intimidate. Sadly, when we do the same thing, it's not quite as intimidating as perhaps when an animal does it. Hairs are protein fibers that are produced by hair follicles. Hair follicles are organs that extend deep into the dermis and subcutaneous layers. So in this figure, you can see these hair follicles extending through the dermis. So the dermis is this pink area here, and they go down into the hypodermis here. Hairs consist of dead keratinized cells. The function of hair is to alert the body to the presence of insects on the skin, or in the case of hair on your scalp, it guards against physical trauma, heat loss, and sunlight. Hairs are located all over your body except for on the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, your lips, your nipples, and portions of the external genitalia. Humans typically have three types of hair. The first type of hair is called vellus hair. This is pale, fine body hair that you find on children and sometimes on adult females. Next, you have terminal hairs. Look in the mirror, the hair on top of your head, the hair of your eyebrows. If you have longer hair on your arms and legs, in your axillary or pubic regions, that's the terminal hair. Men will oftentimes have terminal hair on their face and neck. Lanugo is the fine, soft hair that covers the surface of a fetus or a newborn. You might have seen it, for example, on a baby's forehead when it's only a few days old. Hair tends to grow in stages. You have a growth phase, which can last weeks to years. That's followed by a regressive stage and a resting phase of 1 to 3 months. How long a growth phase lasts kind of varies. A growth phase can last for 6 to 10 years in the scalp, but be only 3 to 4 months in eyebrows. Alopecia is hair thinning in both sexes that happens at age 40, and there's actually many different types of alopecia. True or frank baldness is the type of baldness that men experience. It's genetically determined and it's a sex-influenced condition. Male pattern baldness is caused by a follicular response to DHT, a metabolite of testosterone. So now let's take a few minutes to review. Here are some questions. I'll read the question, then press pause, think of your answer, and join me when you're ready to see if you're correct. Here's the first one. Which of the following types of sweat gland secretion is thought to deter insects? Would that be eccrine, apocrine, ceremoniousous, or mammary? Ceremoniousous, right. Cerumen is the proper name for earwax, and it is secreted by ceruminous glands in the ear canal. The most important role of the eccrine sweat gland is that milk production, stress-induced sweating, body temperature regulation, or earwax production? Body temperature regulation. That's right. It helps keep us, sweating helps keep us cool under pressure. One critical function of sebum, in addition to roles in waterproofing and skin softening, is that it provides protection against, is that exposure to the sun, overheating, harmful bacteria, or abrasions or cuts to the skin. The correct answer here is harmful bacteria. What is one major function of the erector pili contraction that is particularly important in non-human mammals? Is it the erector pili muscle contracts to allow for hair growth, or the erector pili muscle contracts to shed dead hairs, or the erector pili muscle contracts to alarm an approaching predator, or all of the above? Number 3, right. The erector pili muscle contracts to alarm an approaching predator. Remember, animals contract that muscle to make their hair stand up and make them look bigger when they are threatened. So let's finish up with a little pathology of the skin. The first pathology that we want to consider is acne. Acne vulgaris affects about 96% of teens and young adults to some degree. It's caused when there's an accumulation of sebum and dead cells within sebaceous glands. Remember, we said that these glands secrete via that holocrine mechanism where the whole cell ruptures, leaving cellular debris inside of the gland. When there's an accumulation of dead cells and sebum, you get something called a comedone. This is a blackhead, and occasionally it becomes infected by Propionibacterium acnes, resulting in inflammation and the formation of a pustule or a pimple. So in this picture, you can see some examples of blackheads, and then in this picture you can see some examples of the pustules or pimples. Acne may be severe in some people, and it can cause permanent scarring. Male sex hormones like testosterone are the primary cause. Acne tends to be more pronounced in males entering puberty, and it decreases and may disappear by age 20 to 25, although acne may persist much longer in some individuals. Wounds are another common skin pathology. They are defined as any disruption in the skin's integrity. That means any break that occurs in the skin. Your wounds include lacerations, which are commonly called cuts, burns, and skin cancers. We'll take a look at burns and skin cancers in this video. Burns are wounds that are caused by agents such as extreme heat, extreme cold, electricity, chemicals, and radiation, and your burns are grouped into 3 classes according to the extent and depth of tissue damage. The first type of burn is depicted here. It's called a first-degree burn or a superficial burn. These are minor wounds that only damage the epidermis. So in this image, the damaged epidermis is depicted as gray. The skin may develop erythema, remember that's a red appearance, and there may be some mild pain, but there's no permanent damage to the skin. A second-degree burn is characterized by the formation of pain, blistering, and some scarring. Second-degree burns are called partial thickness burns, and they involve the epidermis and part or all of the dermis. So in this image here, you can see the epidermis has been colored gray and part of the dermis has also been colored gray. That's how you know this is a second degree or a partial thickness burn. Your third type of burn, as depicted here, is a third-degree burn or a full thickness burn. These are the most damaging of the wounds. They involve the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis, and potentially these burns can extend even deeper into the muscle or bone. Generally, third-degree burns look a lot worse than they feel because nerves get destroyed as well. So people lose their ability to feel pain. Typically, there's major tissue damage with a third degree or full thickness burn, and that'll be followed by significant scarring. The skin may be hairless because of the loss of hair follicles, and it may require skin grafts from other parts of the body to heal the wound due to diminished or absent keratin production. Two major complications of this type of wound are problems with dehydration due to massive fluid loss from swelling and infection. In fact, when someone gets a burn, the greatest risk to their health actually comes from infection. Typically, burns are considered critical injuries if greater than 25% of the body has a second-degree burn or greater than 10% of the body has third-degree burns. It's also a critical injury if the face, the hands, or the feet bear third-degree burns. In a clinical environment, the rule of nines is a method used for estimating how much of a body has been affected by a burn. In this method, the body is divided into 11 areas, each representing 9% of the total body area. So as you can see in this image, the forehead and the back of the head represent 9%. The chest represents 18%. The back represents 18%. The front and back of the arms, that's 9% for each arm. The front of the leg is 9%. The back of the leg is 9%. And what a clinician is going to do when they have a patient that has burns is you're just going to simply add up the areas that were affected. So for example, if you get a patient and that patient has burns all over their chest, then you would say they have 18% burn coverage. Or if the person had burns all over their arm, one arm, and let's say one part of their leg, let's say they burned scalding water all over their arm and over the front of their leg, then the arm would be 9% and the front of the leg would be 9%, so you would say that's 18%. The rule of nines is a useful clinical tool for grading the extent of a burn. The severity and extent of a burn is used to direct treatment options for patients. Skin cancer is another type of wound. Cancer is one of the most common diseases in the world. It's caused by mutations in DNA that induce a cell to lose control of its cell cycle. Unchecked cell division eventually leads to the formation of a large population of undifferentiated cells known as a tumor. Cancerous tumors are tumors that are able to metastasize, so that is, cancer cells leave a tumor and then they travel throughout the body via the lymphatic or blood vessels to other tissues where they lodge in and begin to divide, forming another tumor. Damage caused by metastatic tumor cells can alter the function of the invaded organs. 3 cancers affect the skin. These are all linked to UV radiation exposure. Remember, that type of exposure usually comes from the sun. Other factors that can increase someone's risk for developing cancer include exposure to cancer-inducing chemicals, toxins or agents, which collectively we call carcinogens, and certain forms of radiation. There are 3 types of skin cancers that you need to know for this class. The first skin cancer type is called basal cell carcinoma. This is the most common of all cancer types, including skin cancer. It arises from keratinocytes in the stratum basale of the epidermis. Skin that is regularly exposed to UV radiation is at risk for developing these tumors. In this case, the melanin does not prevent damage to the DNA inside the nuclei of those stratum basale cells. The cancer usually appears as a nodule with a central crater. These tumors rarely metastasize to other tissues, and so this type of cancer can be resolved or healed successfully with surgical removal. This is an image of what basal cell carcinoma looks like. The second type of skin cancer that you need to know is squamous cell carcinoma. This is the second most common skin cancer. Here you have cancer of the keratinocytes in the stratum spinosum. This type of tumor forms scaly plaques that can ulcerate, that is, they can form wounds and they'll bleed. This type of tumor is usually found on the head and on the neck. Now, these tumors are more likely to metastasize than the basal cell carcinoma tumors, but surgical removal is still useful. The third type of skin cancer that you are responsible for is malignant melanoma. This is cancer of the melanocytes, and early detection of melanoma is critical due to the tendency of this type of cancer to metastasize. Remember how we looked at the melanocytes in my last video and they looked kind of spidery with these long arms or processes? That's how they distributed the melanosomes to keratinocytes. The arms of those cancerous melanocytes can extend down into the dermis from the epidermis and access blood vessels. This enables their spread to other tissues via the bloodstream. Treatment usually consists of surgical removal and possibly chemotherapy. The success of those treatments is determined by the size and the depth to which the malignant melanoma tumor extends into the dermis and metastasizes to other tissues. The ABCDE rule helps us to distinguish malignant melanoma from other skin cancers and normal moles. On the right hand of this slide, I've added two pictures of melanoma from the cancer.gov website and one picture of a normal mole. As we go through the letters of the ABCDE rule, compare the two and see if you can recognize why the pictures on the right are melanoma and how they're different from the one on the left that says normal. A stands for asymmetrical shape. Malignant melanomas have asymmetrical shape, so that means if you were to divide the tumor into two parts, the sides would not match. The B stands for border. The border of the tumor will be irregular in shape. It won't be smooth. It might look kind of wavy or lumpy. C stands for color. Malignant melanoma is usually a dark blue-black, or it has a variety of colors. In the images on this slide, the tumors appear kind of mottled or marbled. The D is diameter. Malignant melanoma tumors are generally larger than about 6 millimeters in size, so they're about the size of a pencil eraser. And E, probably the most important one of all, is evolving. Malignant melanomas change over time. They change in shape and they change in size. This is different from normal moles. Normal moles can stay the same for tens of years. So let's wrap up this video with a few review questions. Here's the first one. What is the immediate threat from severe burns? Is it bacterial infection, inadequate body temperature maintenance, loss of water and electrolytes, or scarring? Loss of water and electrolytes. It does take a little bit of time for bacterial infections to establish, and scarring takes weeks to happen. But the loss of water and electrolytes due to swelling happens immediately. Which of the following types of skin cancer is the most dangerous? Is it basal cell, squamous cell, malignant melanoma, or all are equally dangerous? The answer here is malignant melanoma. Remember, malignant melanoma tumors have the tendency to metastasize. That means that recognition of these tumors and seeking treatment are of utmost importance. In this video, I identified and described the accessory structures or appendages of the skin. Remember that these are structures that are derived from the epidermal layers of the skin, and they include your eccrine and apocrine sweat glands. Remember, your cereminous and mammary glands fall into that category. I talked about your sebaceous glands and your hairs. I didn't talk about nails, but there is information about nails in your textbook if you're interested. We also talked a bit about the erector pili muscles. Remember that the erector pili are not accessory structures of the skin. They're not appendages because they're not derived from the epidermis, but they do play an important role in making the hair stand up and in helping the sebaceous glands to secrete. I also described or characterized different types of wounds that occur in the skin. We talked about acne, 3 different types of cancer, and 3 different types of burns. The information about acne, burns, and cancer do appear on your exam, so you do want to spend some time reviewing that material, especially the rule of nines, the distinctions between the burns, and the different types of cancer tumors. I hope these videos were helpful in getting you through Chapter 5. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me next time I see you in class or send me an email.